Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. So I have another great guest and someone that I'm really excited to talk to and have a conversation with today. But I think more importantly, somebody that I can see is going to add a lot of value. And I think the reason why this conversation is going to be very different from many of the others that we have, even though they're all fantastic and amazing. My intuition is that Miranda Phillips, our guest here today, is going to share I think how to look at this business in a more holistic fashion, right? And so I'm really excited about this. The name of her business is Elite Wealth and Wellness. And, what's really cool is she was, or is rather, a doctor and someone who started off as a doctor going to medical school. And, now she's a full-time real estate investor and has created additional time in her retirement to now start going back and doing or exploring medicine, which she really loves. So this is going to be a great conversation. So I want to welcome you to the show, Miranda. I'm very excited to get into this.
Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate you inviting me on the show, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, hey, really honored to have you on board. So tell me a little bit about your background, your story. I find it pretty fascinating. So I think it's always great to share your story, to invite our audience into this and to engage them. So please, share your story.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. No, so I guess my story kind of starts many years ago, as a kid and just having a special place in my heart to help people and always carrying that around with me and always volunteering my time. And then naturally, I decided I wanted to become a physician, but really, from a financial standpoint, I had no business thinking I could become a physician. Came from a very poor middle class, I would say, family. And, my parents were able to put food on our table, which is great, and offered me a lot of social support, which is phenomenal these days, especially. And so I'm very privileged for that they definitely were very straightforward with me and said, look, if you want to go to college and med school, like, we believe in you, you can do anything you want, but we don't have the money to support you at all. And so I started figuring things out on my own and doing my own research, like, how do I get a hold of money? How do I get myself through school? And just kind of felt my way in the dark, was able to get through medical school and chose emergency medicine as my field of specialty. And then, of course, by the time I was a first year attending, which was in 2012, I was $200,000 in debt, student loan debt. So came out of residency and was working hard as an attending physician and focusing on paying down student loan debt. Of course, that's before my financial education. I didn't really know to do anything different or look at debt in any particular way other than something to get rid of. And so I kind of went down that trail, and I was still loving being a physician and always have had a passion for medicine, still have a passion for medicine. I had a period of time there where I was being asked to take on more and more leadership responsibilities year over year. And I was absolutely loving the growth that I was experiencing and the growth I was helping others experience. And what crept up on me, I guess, was there's real insidious that I started losing more and more of my time, and my priorities were shifting without me really recognizing it at first. I had a family and eventually had kids as well. And I was wanting to spend more time with my family, but not knowing how to create that time, not knowing where to find it, while still feeling pressure to give more of myself and more of my time to the field of medicine. And so I decided I needed a lifeboat. I needed to build a safety boat to be able to get out in case I couldn't fend off the pressures, and if I really never found a way to be able to reclaim my time and be able to bond and connect with my family and take care of my own health the way I knew I needed to. So the lifeboat that I built was found in real estate, multifamily real estate investing. And so in about 3 years or so, was able to just dive in, even when I had no time. I got to, a point in my medical career where I literally got 2 hours of sleep for 2 weeks in a row, just in a call room, never making it home even. And it was at that point, excuse me, that I really thought, okay, this is it. Like, I got to do something different for sure. There's no way this is sustainable. And
Sure.
so that's exactly, what I did. And so I made time even when there was no time to be had, and got educated. And like I said, about 3 years later, was able to build a vehicle that has created, the equivalent of 3 physician salaries worth of passive income. And I retired, retired out of emergency medicine in January of 2020. And then, of course, after my retirement there, I was already starting to rediscover my passion, for medicine and helping people. But I needed to recreate something I really wanted. And I needed it to not take all of my nights and my weekends and my holidays, and be able to block time, for family. And so I was able to do that. And so here I am today, and just having a fantastic life.
Awesome. I really love that. So, I heard you say a lot of things that really stood out, but one of the things that I'm going to ask you to elaborate on, okay, is you commenting on the fact that you've now rediscovered one of your passions, right? So the reason why I think that's important to talk about is we all have a lot of passions, right? But I think sometimes those passions, they can get overcome, or they can get masked, if you will, when we're too consumed doing things that don't allow us to be creators, right? That don't allow us to utilize the talents that we have to create. And for me, real estate is one of those spaces where I can create space, right? Or create space really through increasing passive income, right? To allow me to do other things. And I think sometimes, from what I can see, and so I'm going to ask you to elaborate on this as well. This is going to be kind of a long-winded question, but I have to give an example. I think oftentimes when I hear people talk about building wealth, I think one of the mistakes that I see is, it's a lot easier to build wealth when you have time to think of ways to make money, right? But
Yes.
and it's really true. It's really true.
It is.
But when your mind is absorbed in things that are not going to allow you to create or build income, it's very difficult to break out of that. And so oftentimes when I talk to people, investors, friends, colleagues, one of my very first questions when they ask me, hey, look, where do you suggest I deploy capital? And I ask, hey, well, what is your primary objective? Usually it comes down to creating some form of additional time, right? And so I always ask, well, what are you going to do with that additional time? Because that additional time is ultimately where you start expanding your capacity to build wealth. And it could look like a couple different things. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, what you said is right on. I can certainly speak to that from my own experience, in that I call it getting into the weeds. And sometimes I'll even reference being in a bunny hole. I'll call it my little bunny hole. And what I mean by that is I get so focused in, which can be a good thing. Having the ability to focus is awesome. But I think for a lot of people who are achievers, especially high achievers, we tend to get focused in on an achievement, and it ends up being a little bit to the detriment of other aspects of life. And so we get honed in on it, and we forget that we need to back up and appreciate the other aspects of life and enjoy the other aspects of life and give gratitude for the achievements we've already created. And, I think that it's very easy to get caught up in the day to day and in those weeds and just get busy. It's kind of a busy being busy type of habit that we can get into. And to your point, if we stay in that busy being busy and all we have time for is going to work and going to sleep and trying to squeeze in some food and squeeze in some family time, then exactly what you said, if we haven't time blocked an opportunity to go have a blank slate, like nature, being in nature, I love being in nature because I can turn my phone off. I can even go somewhere where there's no signal, and I can really break away from the world. And that's where I personally discover my creativity, and I discover the ability to assimilate all these different pillars of life that are necessary for human happiness and take action in all of those pillars such that they benefit each other, and not take action that's contradicting another one of those pillars unknowingly. And to your point, That's exactly how you build wealth. Is you have to have blocked time to be able to create your strategy. And the strategy, you can build this snowball and you can kick the snowball down the mountain and it'll just pick up speed and it'll gain momentum and create an even bigger snowball. But you've got to get it kicked off the side of the mountain first. And so the way you do that is really trying to figure out what are actions I can take that are not just beneficial in one way, but are beneficial across all the different modalities of life that I absolutely have to have for my own sustainability and to be able to positively impact the lives of others, and that includes having your ability to achieve, to learn and grow in different ways. That's part of what, creates the happy chemicals in our brain. Part of that is our physical health. That creates happy chemicals in our brain when we can do things to progress ourselves forward with physical health. In our, what I call the soul pillar, which is our uniqueness, our specialness, if you will, and our individuality, the ability to take what, God-given or universe-given skills that we have and be able to utilize those again, to learn and to grow, to keep ourselves healthy, and then to positively impact others. And then socially to be able to connect with others and have positive relationships. And of course, financial freedom just being a tool for all of that. So yeah, exactly. Like you said, John, it's really so very important to really just kind of back up and think about an overarching strategy and just kind of get out of those day-to-day weeds.
Okay, cool. So now let's talk about mapping that over to this business, right? To real estate investing or vice versa, really. But it's really, I always say theory is great, but understanding how to map that over and making it practical or actually putting it in a way that we can apply to our lives in a practical manner is ultimately where the wins are created, right? So can you maybe now start navigating us to that path, right, on how you've been able to apply this to your life, maybe through some examples, because I think most people learn through case studies, as I call them, or through real life examples. So maybe share a scenario where, you can say, okay, hey, look, here's kind of what we do and here's how we map this over. And here's what it looks like in real life. I think that will really help our audience, wrap their mind around this, because this can be kind of a complicated concept to wrap your mind around, especially if you're not currently living that way now, right?
Absolutely.
If you're not currently living that way now, it can be a little bit difficult to grasp. So can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I would say not even just a little bit difficult, it's a lot of it difficult. And whenever, even whenever I realized that was what I needed to do and that I needed to kind of get myself more balanced and get a strategy together, I really had to find the time to do that. And I would say that most people just say, I just don't have the time. And they'll stand by that. But I'm going to say, look, if I'm only getting 2 hours of sleep a night for 2 weeks and I still found the time, I challenge you to back that statement and really tell me you can't find the time, because ultimately it really depends on how much pain you're feeling or how much pleasure you want to experience in life, how much you really want to live a fulfilled life. And you really have to make a decision that I need to do something different. And for me, the pain was sharp enough that I said, that's it, time to do something different. I need to reprioritize. So I took everything on my calendar and said, okay, I know this is all important, but now it's time to get serious. Like what's really important and to think about life slightly differently. And that was what it took for me. And so my husband and I, at the time we were not married and we were dating, but he, being an orthopedic trauma surgeon, was feeling, some of the same pains that I was. And so we decided to start kind of embarking on this together just to have a teammate to be able to do this with. And so we started doing things kind of 50-50. And, like we went in, we hired wealth coaches, we hired, investing coaches and multifamily coaches. We had mentors all over the place. We were traveling, even though we didn't have time to travel, we figured it out and we just went anyway. And so again, we really just started looking at our priorities and really saying what's really important. Like, I know it's all important, but now it's time to really, put our money where our mouth is and figure out what's really, truly important. And, health, our health was one of them. And then our family, was another one of those. And, other things that just, for whatever reason, the weeds of life, I guess, we just didn't see the value that they hold, like personal health. And, what happens when you lose that? And so you don't want that to happen. And, having relationships and how precious the time is when you have kids, before they get out and into the world, and the time you have to build those relationships. And, so again, looking at your schedule and figuring out what is the highest priority and how am I going to make time for that, and tackling it. And so getting really clear on a goal. So one of the things that we did with the wellness course is I walk people through the exact step-by-step process that I ultimately went through. I went through it in a much messier way. And so then I went back and thought about, okay, what did I do to get to where I'm at today? What did that require? So I cleaned it all up and integrated it all and made it to where, anyone who kind of goes through this process will be able to do it a lot more cleaner and faster than I did. But it includes figuring out what your dream life really looks like, which means getting clear on your priorities and then creating a strategy around that. And it includes understanding, what is human happiness? Like when you lose your happiness, when you become depressed, like you've got a risk of death by suicide, right? And if you lose your physical health, you have a risk of death by losing that physical health. So there's medical science and literature out there, and plenty of it, that tells us what we require as humans to be able to continue life on Earth. And so whenever you understand that and you understand how to experience happiness and how to prevent yourself from becoming depressed, which means understanding things that you may not be thinking of right now and things that you really don't think are important actually are pretty important. But if you're in the day-to-day weeds and kind of running that daily treadmill, you don't stop and back up and think about these things. But you have to really get clear on what you want your life to look like and what's really important, and then think about how to achieve that. And of course, one of the ways to achieve that that's most critical is buying back your time, getting financially free so that you're not handcuffed to a job that you have to go to work because there's bills to pay, right? And there's mouths to feed. And so that money does have to come from somewhere. You could be a broke millionaire and own millions and millions of dollars in assets, but if they're not cash flowing, they're not paying you, you've still got a job you've got to go do. You're still handcuffed to something that's going to require your time in order to get a paycheck and be able to feed those mouths, right? And so at the end of the day, people will realize the importance of financial freedom, and it's not the money. Money won't buy you happiness. Money, it just magnifies who you are as a person, because now you have money to go spend on doing the behaviors you were already doing before, but whenever you get financially free and realize now I have all this time, you have to ask yourself, so what do I do with all this time? But again, that requires being clear on what your goals are and what your priorities are. And so all of those are key elements to really figuring out, how to implement that strategy. And then the financial freedom part is just a science, more or less. Our wealth course, we walk people through that, and take them step by step. Here's action item number 1, do this. Action item number 2, do this. And again, it's the same step by step process, that we went through to become financially free as well. And I would say that part is almost the easiest, just because it's so scientific. You just, do it, do this, do this, do this. Whereas in the wellness course, it is scientific, but it also varies from individual to individual, because we're all unique humans and we have different values and we have different priorities. And so it takes some soul searching to really discover who you are, who you want to be, who you want to be for your family, who you want to be for yourself, and get out of the spotlight of other people's expectations.
Okay, cool. So, let me try to make this a little bit more tangible, right, for our audience, because what you shared, I think, was really neat. But let me see if I can help make this a little bit more tangible for our audience, right?
Sure.
So let's use me as an example. So what questions would you ask me, for example, to help me gain clarity on where I want to, let me ask the question differently. What questions do you start asking me today to help me gain clarity on who I want to become, right? Or where I want to be. So those can be a little bit different, but I heard you say who I want to become. So I like that, because I think there's a lot of truth in that. So can you maybe just kind of walk me through a scenario?
Yeah. So one of the questions I'd first start by asking you is, are you clear on what your goals are? Like, do you know what you're missing in your life right now that would make you really happy?
Let's see, do I know what I'm missing in my life right now that would make me really happy? Well, I think the first thing is I always ask myself, what do I want, right? Almost in everything that I do now, like, what is it that I want? Because I know if you can't answer that, and I'll share with you a really funny story. One of my really good friends many years ago, My wife and I were really big on finding ways to seek people out and paying for advice, paying for specific information, right? To speed up the process by which we take to get us to where we want to go. And that could be in a lot of different areas, in marriage, in business. Let's see, what else? Financial aspect, right? So a really good friend of mine, we reached out. They operate a fairly large real estate brokerage, actually a very large real estate brokerage. And so we wanted to find a couple where they were business partners, but where they built out a fairly large enterprise, right? Because it's a little different when you're working with someone that maybe they don't understand the dynamic that you're in, whereas when you are going out and you're seeking someone very specific that has some dynamics very similar to you, but that have scaled, okay, there are a lot of learning lessons there that now we can literally go and buy, right? We just have to be the ones who actually take the advice or the information and implement it. So one day I asked the guy, we're talking through a couple of scenarios, and he said, "Hey, John, what do you want?" And this is a true story, and this is years ago. But I gave him, I really was not able to answer that question. I gave him all the things that I didn't want, right? And then he finally kept asking, "What do you want?" And finally, when I became aware of the fact that I was doing that, it was truly like an eye-opening experience, right? It was like a revelation. I go, wow, this is pretty incredible. And he just walked me through that exercise, and he spent 5 minutes of asking me, "What do I want?" And unconsciously, I kept telling him what I didn't want. and we did that for 5 minutes, and finally he kept doing the same thing until I realized what I was doing, right? So for me, that was a huge breakthrough. So anyways, the point there being is I always start with what I want. But I took that a step further, which is why I kind of resonated with what you're doing, is now I took that a step further, and I had to look at different aspects of my life, right? Because ultimately, we're really multidimensional human beings, but for whatever reason, we've gotten into this habit really of living maybe in one or two dimensions of our life, right? Like we go work and then we come home and we work out, right? But ultimately, we're really human beings in a couple different dimensions. One is our health, the other family, social, right? And then of course, business, because we have to be able to provide for ourselves and our families, or we have to be able to finance the other three aspects of our lives, right? Or domains, I call them. So, I can really appreciate what you said. So now let me ask you this, okay? So if I were an investor coming to you saying, "You know what? I really have an interest in wanting to learn how to go from, where I am today to getting to $1 million." Okay. Because that I think is maybe it's a thought that a lot of people have, right? Right now I'm working in a W-2 job. I do well, right? Say I'm making, 6 figures, but I don't have the time to go out and find investments like you do, right? Because you're doing this on a full-time basis.
Right.
But I do want to invest in real estate because I see the value in it, but I just don't have the time to do that. And so what would be the next progression of questions, right? Once I shared with you, "Hey, look, this is where I want to go."
Yeah. So for people that really want to get invested and they just don't have the time to commit like I do to go find those relationships, that's actually a problem that we sought to solve with Elite Wealth and Wellness, because, whenever we didn't have the time to go find those networks of people, we still figured it out because we were that desperate. But there are people who are not as desperate as we were at one point, and that they still want to become investors and they want to create that cash flow and they want to achieve great success, but they just don't have the trusting relationships to do it. They know and they like and trust us. A lot of original investors that we had were friends from, just the medical profession. And so they already trusted us because they've known us for years and years. And so we've continued building out those trusting relationships with investors. And when it comes to the deals, we have to go get relationships with commercial brokers and with other GPT mates that we may want to do business with and, go look at the markets, do the research in the markets. So, you already know all of this. So it takes a lot of time. So then what does someone do who doesn't have all that time and they don't really know, like, do I go to a, crowdfunding platform or do I go straight into the property or what do I do?
Right.
And so again, we kind of achieve, we strive to answer those questions, with the wealth course because it's so specific to different people, right? If I have $500 to invest, that's going to look differently. Whenever I tell people what I would do with $500, that's going to be different than what I would do if I had $50,000 to invest. I'm not going to invest it in the same vehicle. It's going to be a different platform for a variety of reasons, that would take a lot to explain. But the point being, people do need those relationships and they need, after the education, they need networks. And networks, I think, fortunately, there's a lot of different networks out there. And I really don't think you can be in too many networks. I know for me personally, we've created our network and we make that available through Elite Wealth and Wellness and available to our investors and our Elite Wealth and Wellness members. But there's other networks around the country where people have done similar things where, they've created their own trusting relationships and people that they've been doing business with for years. And so they're able to make introductions. And, as it's a very relationship business because whenever it comes down to investing your money, there's so much paperwork involved, obviously that to some degree, you really have to trust who you're doing business with, right?
Sure.
And at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but for me, that's kind of one of my ultimate criteria is like, do I know you? Do I trust you? What's your track record and who can I talk to that's done business with you? And how do I figure out, in a non-biased way, like what you're about? And so I think where reputation comes into play, as well. So, how can people, to answer your question, so how do I help people, get that network and get that deal flow? Well, that's part of why we created Elite Wealth and Wellness is because we brought everyone that we've been doing business with, and we're in over, 25 different deals or so. And so we bring our team, our network into this platform and say, look, we know I can trust these people. If I can trust us and you want to meet these people and contact them and consider doing business with them, we're going to bring them right to you. That way you don't have to go out and end up having to spend all the time and money we did creating the network.
Okay, so let me qualify a little bit. Let me qualify that a little bit. So does that mean that you are making investments on behalf of your investors or alongside them, right? What does that look like? So say, for example, you have $2 million to invest, okay?
Right.
Whether you syndicate that, right, and form partnerships or a partnership rather to be able to deploy that capital into another investment. So let's just use a whole number. Say it's $2 million. So are you going out and looking for and vetting other deals, if you will, to then deploy that capital into as a general partner or as a limited partner or both?
Both is the ultimate answer. That's the most succinct answer. So I would say that probably over 90% of the passive income that we have coming in is just through limited partnerships. So money that we've invested into other people's deals and that are kicking off returns. Okay. And so we bring, those people into our network platform as well and say, hey, these guys, we've invested with them, they've operated well and paid us well. And so, we can certainly vouch for these guys and gals. I will also say that we do go and vet our own deals and acquire our own deals. And of course, as you know, that takes time in and of itself as well. And so because we have money coming in and we want to redeploy it. We don't like holding on to capital. And so we want to get it redeployed. So we're constantly on the search and constantly looking, for deal opportunities. But, we don't want to sit on a large sum of cash for very long. And so we'll continue to deploy cash into other people's deals as we are also continuing to search for our own deals and executing as general partners in those deals. And to answer your other part of your question, yes, we invest obviously our own money in deals and, a lot more money typically than the limited partners as well. And so we're definitely an invest alongside you type of team versus someone who brings a deal but doesn't invest in the deal. But to also speak to then the other aspect of your question is, I have a very abundant mindset, if you will, a very collaborative mindset. So I have no reservations in, making those introductions to other people so that, I can help my friends and Elite Wealth and Wellness members increase their own deal flow, even if they're invested in deals that aren't necessarily something that I'm a general partner in.
Sure. Well, awesome. I really appreciate that. So can you give me some examples of some of the types of deals that you either are looking to invest in now or have invested in? Like what that
Sure.
looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So from, I would say a limited partner investor standpoint is similar to a GP investor standpoint as far as criteria. I really I love Texas and I love Florida and I love Arizona. There are states that there's high population growth and I like primary markets. I'm not necessarily opposed to looking at secondary markets as well, or even tertiary if the deal is right. But primary markets, I'm kind of I like to mitigate risk where I can. And so I certainly like the diversity in the primary markets. I like the economic growth, the population growth, just the variety of jobs that can be found. There's certain, like in, Texas and Florida, they're no income tax states. And so they tend to attract people that don't want to pay income tax as well, which I can appreciate. So it's one of the reasons, that they tend to grow at a faster rate. They're landlord friendly states as well. Arizona falls into this as well. And bits of Colorado, certain markets as well. And we definitely like economies of scale, whether it's investing as a limited partner or a general partner. So bigger is generally better as long as the numbers still work. We tend to invest in, I think the smallest deal we invested in, I think it was 140 doors. That's the smallest property. And then, as a GP, we're on a 420 unit deal, as an LP. I think I've invested in a 2-property portfolio that totaled around, maybe 700 or 800 doors in, total. And actually, we recently invested in one that's, over 1,000 doors with the portfolio, down in Houston as well. I think about 5 different properties. So, just to give you an idea, and we're always looking at growth markets, of course, and, having to study those markets, which is fun to figure out the different economic life cycles of different markets in different states. And so that's kind of overview, I guess, of what our specific criteria is. We do like the already cash flowing assets. We've done new development deals. I'm not opposed to them, but I'm not necessarily loving those at the moment. I tend to flock towards the things that are already cash flowing, already leased up. And I kind of like value add type of deals, the ability to force the appreciation a little bit. So just to give you some insight.
Awesome. So a couple of questions. Okay. And I know we're approaching the end of our show, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. But when you say you generally prefer larger deals and you gave some examples of that, can you elaborate on that a little bit for our audience?
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, whenever you've got greater economies of scale, for instance, like if I have a 400 door, property versus a 200 door property, you could kind of do the math, but, if you raise the rent, if you do your value add, and improve the property and upgrade the units, and let's say you only raise the rent $20, and you do it across 200 doors. Well, it looks much differently if you raise, $20 a door across 400 doors. And then of course you want to take that and translate it into how it affects your net operating income, and then apply that to the market cap to figure out your value. And then of course you want to go in having an exit strategy so you know how to get that value out. But that's kind of what I speak to whenever I say economies of scale, and that, you can do one closing for more doors, instead of buying 200 single family homes, I can buy 200 single family homes under one roof. It's called an apartment complex, and just have one closing and, one broker fee and all of these things as well. And then a property manager that won't charge me as much just because, they've got all their units in under one roof as well. And then I can go in and do that value add and again, just kind of start bumping those rents across more doors, which ultimately can translate into more value.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate being on. This has been a great show. And I like the approach, right? A little bit unique, how you use one domain of your life to improve the others, and then ultimately take people down the path of, expanding their wealth. I think that's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. So one of the questions that I always ask before we exit off the show is, what is the one question that you have of me that you think can add some value to our audience?
The question that I would ask you that would add value to the audience. Yeah, I would say, what do you feel like is the biggest accomplishment you've achieved in the past 6 months?
Let's see, in the past 6 months, the biggest accomplishment. Now that's a unique one. I've never been asked that.
Let's say the greatest. Let's say the greatest, the most impactful to you accomplishment.
Yeah, for sure. So the most impactful to me would be my family, right? That would be for sure the most impactful. So let's see, over the last 6 months, we've gone through a big transition with our family. Of course, we just are kind of evolving out of the COVID market, but I had the 14-year-old daughter who is a freshman in high school, right? So she transitioned into high school. She's also a student athlete, also playing basketball. So with her, I spent, since 2020, COVID started in March. So really since March, once we got the stay-home order, we were home, but we were still really, really active, right? And so I was training with her for almost a year. She started weight training. So she said, "Hey, Dad, I want to get stronger and faster. And, I want to be able to compete at the varsity level as a freshman." I said, "Okay, well, these are the things that we're going to have to do, or you're going to have to do rather." So she did make her varsity team, and she's competing, and she's doing really well, right? She's growing as a person. With my middle daughter, my 19-year-old freshman in college. And so she's going through some very similar things, and she's doing well. She's thriving. And my oldest daughter, my 23-year-old, is out of college, started her own business. And, I helped her with that, or my wife and I did. And so over the last 6 months, the reason why I say that would be the greatest impact that I've had, I guess, within the last 6 months is it's kind of cool that the very principles that we're talking about, I've been able to work with my kids, right, in some very unique ways, but that cover all aspects of literally what we just discussed, right? So if I look at my oldest daughter, that would be a great analogy on her covering all of these aspects. And if I use business, right, because she's an entrepreneur, it would check all these boxes. My middle daughter, same thing, right, with college and, her wanting to get in better shape. And so it's really cool. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome.
But a really great impact because they're all young ladies. They're all extraordinarily strong-willed kids. But I've learned that if I want to go out and have a positive impact on the world, the best place to start is in my own home. And so I get to see them go out and take the same principles that my wife and I teach them and go out and impact other people's lives, right? And so, this is a kind of a topic that I'm really passionate about. I always laugh when I get into these conversations with my friends about politics and they're always talking about the impact
that
politicians are having in the community. And I always scratch my head. I go, look, man, if you want to make massive impact, just start in your own home.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. That's fantastic. And you've got the freedom to do it.
I do.
Awesome.
And I'm very grateful for that. But, like everything else, that has to be created, right? It doesn't fall from the heavens.
Yeah.
So anyways, I really appreciate the question, but that would be, looking back over the last 6 months, that would be how I think I've created the greatest impact. Not only within my own kids, but within my community as well, right? Which is pretty cool. And that's what the show is all about.
Oh man, I love it. And I think that offers a ton of value to your listeners as well, because they can hear in your voice and I can see in your facial expressions how rewarding that has been for you, and how much, elatement, you've experienced just from being able to do that. And so I think that really sends a message, and the message is, like, you can experience extreme fulfillment, and this guy right here in front of me, John Brackett, he's going to help you do that.
Yeah, no, I look, listen, man, I live it. I make no apologies for, how hard I work and how much fun I have in my life. Zero.
That's right. Absolutely. I love it.
Because it's the truth, right? I think, it takes a massive amount of energy and effort to be able to produce a result that is sustainable. And the reality is you still have to work to be able to sustain that. It really doesn't matter what area of your life it is. But especially if it's your family and your marriage, it takes a massive amount of energy to create, a great marriage, right? And I've been married to my wife for 25 years. And so, I can speak to that from personal experience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I really appreciate the question. I think it was a great one, really unique one. I've never been asked that before, but I guess the timing was really good. So Miranda, what is the best way for our audience to find you? I guess is the best.
Yeah, they can, certainly I can be found on my website, www.elitewealthandwellness.com. And anyone that wants to reach out can do so. They can find me at, Miranda, Miranda at elitewealthandwellness.com. Happy to chat anytime.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for being on. Had a great time, great show. And I want to wish you continued success. And I'm sure we're going to connect or bump into each other at some point in time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, John. It's been fun.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.